Good hello and welcome back to Down Under Politics. Tonight there is myself, we have Mitchell, Tom, and David, so the full crew is here, and we're going to talk some politics. Slight change to the way we normally do things. We're actually going to try and structure this thing into some segments so that it kind of makes a little bit of sense rather than just being absolute chaos. Although, as you all know, I do love a bit of chaos. There will be two segments. First, we are going to discuss some news. Then we're going to get into a lovely segment that I like to call the Marketplace of Ideas, where we will discuss a topic. So tonight we're going to be discussing the instance around Lidia Thorpe, the Green Senator from Victoria, as well as landlords and their contribution to society. Oh boy, have we been looking forward to that. But first, so Lidia Thorpe. For those that don't know who she is a Green Senator from Victoria, and she's gotten herself into a little bit of hot water as she had a relationship with a particular ex-bikie boss from the Rebels Outlaw Motorbike Gang. So that's unfortunate for her, given that prior to the election, she was on a committee, which was a law enforcement committee. Which is not great. Not going to lie there. And as a result, since these facts have come into public view, she was asked for her resignation as Deputy Senate Leader by the Leader of the Greens, Adam Bandt, to which she did submit a resignation and is no longer the Deputy Leader of the Senate. So, those are basically the facts. What I've found really interesting about this is I've watched about a half dozen different reportings on it, the Sky News reporting, the ABC reporting, the Project, a couple of others that I forget their names because they can't be that important. And funnily enough, in my opinion, the fairest report and most technically accurate was Friendly Geordie's favourite source of news, the Project. Least accurate, to no one's great surprise, and clearly the most biased, was Sky News. Shocker there. Followed closely by the ABC. Funnily enough, I don't know if you guys saw that link I threw in the chat earlier this week, but the ABC's reporting on this had more of what Peter Dutton had to say about it than they did of what Adam Bandt had to say about it.
I did find myself wondering why that's the case. You'd imagine that since the ABC is now no longer answering to an administration that doesn't want to see it exist, that they'd find it within their hearts to be a little less biased in their reporting.
I have a hypothesis about this, which is purely my opinion based on the things I have observed. I don't know anything going on behind the scene. This is purely my opinion. But I think it is largely because, and this goes back to my overarching hypothesis about the ABC's political ideology, is it's not left or right, it is avoiding getting their funding cut.
Yeah.
But I think it's because it's a Green senator that it happened to. And after the last election, Labor's feeling a bit cagey about the Greens.
I mean, it could be. Right. Oh, sorry, you were going to say, Tom?
No, I agree. That makes sense. Also, they would have to keep in the back of their minds that Labor isn't exactly going to go cutting their funding anytime soon, yet they might not always be in power, and the others definitely will the next chance they get. So they've still got to pander to them even though they're not in power.
They're planning for the future.
How very forward thinking of them.
I just think it's
like
I'm just trying to.
If only one of them is threatening it, that's the only one they have to pander to, no matter who's in power.
That's a fair point, Tom. Mitch, you had something, then we'll go to David.
I was going to say it's broken clock is right twice a day. blind squirrel in a forest somehow finds a nut about the fact that the project of all things is actually being fair on this.
That was actually kind of surprising to me because I do look, as much as I joke about Friendly Geordies and the project, he has a point a lot of the time. Their reporting is absolute rubbish most of the time.
Oh, it's dog crap.
It's terrible.
But in this case, I'm of the opinion that it was the fairest. I mean, they showed the facts of the case just as they were, all of them. As far as I can tell, they showed all of them. They showed more than anyone else did, and they didn't miss any that anyone else reported on. So, as far as I can tell, they shared all of the facts, and they gave, each side of the debate a reasonable amount of time to give their facts, give their side of it.
David, do you want to say something?
I was just reading an article on it because I'm like, why does it matter who she dates? But I guess is the problem more around the fact she didn't disclose it and had a conflict
That
of
is the
interest?
issue. So the issue
Okay.
is that she didn't disclose it. As far as has been reported, as far as I know at this stage, she didn't give him any information that she got that was privileged. So it's not like like before we went live, when we were briefly discussing this before you jumped on, David. It's not really as bad as what happened with Gladys, because while Gladys was there, someone told her information that she should have reported on, and she didn't. In this case, the thing that there is possibility of corruption for something to go wrong would be Lydia giving information that was privileged. As far as we can tell, she didn't do that. Facts may come out that show that she did. I don't know at this stage. But as far as we can tell, that didn't happen. So I'm of the opinion it's not as bad. It's more of there's the potential for corruption there, as opposed to the incident with Gladys, where there was evidence of corruption.
I'd say with Barabenchikin, it was more a case of she knew and didn't do anything. I don't think she herself was corrupt, but I think that she didn't take, like she was willfully ignorant of things that were going on. And in that sense, I do agree. Barabenchikin, probably had more right to resign than Lidia Thorpe did, but I don't think there was a necessity for either of them to resign over. I get it for Barabenchikin, but I think it was the right move, but she could have probably weathered the storm.
Well, look, the genetic life form and disk operating system, full out resigned, as opposed to Lydia, who is still a senator. She's just no longer holding that role of the deputy leader of the Senate.
Having said that, I see that there was a particular narrative being pushed with Gladys's situation, where it's like, oh, she loved the wrong man. Haven't we all just had a bad relationship with a guy who didn't deserve it? Very much eliciting sympathy for her. And
not seeing any of that.
None of that. And you can apply the same thing here. Like, Lydia Thorpe loved the wrong man. You can't control who you love, and she didn't do anything wrong by it. She just didn't say. And the Greens obviously are pushing for transparency in politics, and this is really embarrassing to them about it.
On one hand, yes, it is embarrassing, but I think the way that Adam has handled this whole incident, it's the best he could do with the pieces that he had to play with. Soon as he found out, because keep in mind, he wasn't told that this was going on. I mean, depending on how you want to take that, you can assume he's lying, you can take it at face value, doesn't matter. But if you just go off of the facts that we do know, he wasn't told, and as soon as he found out, he basically went, hey, what the hell? I need your resignation from this higher position. Which I think in that situation, there's not really a better way to handle it. I mean, boot her out of the party and get rid of 10% of your seats?
Well, also worth considering too that I don't think she deserved to resign for this. Having said that, I'm so glad she's gone because she's an embarrassment.
I mean, look, she's still a senator though, Mitchell, and she's still part of the Greens. So as far as the embarrassment thing, because look, she's very good at getting all of the attention for all the wrong reasons. And unlike some politicians, she's not very good at spinning it around into a positive thing.
So I guess I will just keep putting my popcorn in the microwave then.
Yes.
No, but that reminds me exactly of certain other politicians who, let's just say she's not the first one to do that.
No.
And I'm sympathetic to that because there are people who I greatly admire who have the same inability to turn bad attention into good attention.
This is true.
I wonder how they met.
Look, I thought about
It
that
seems
too.
so odd.
I thought about that too, and then I immediately stopped thinking about that.
Interesting question.
Tinder.
Lydia, if you're watching, David wants to know how you met What's His Face. Please respond.
We've established that the Australian public is a sucker for a good love story.
This is true. Maybe this is how you can turn it around. Tell us, focus on the love story, and if the media doesn't, you can then scream that they are biased as fuck, which
and
I mean,
make
you'd be
a
right.
reality TV show.
Oh, yes. When's the Netflix adaptation coming out?
No, my thought process was how the hell does a senator meet the leader of a rebel bikie gang?
The ex-leader of a rebel bikie gang.
Ex-leader, whatever. I
I
just like
presume the way that
senator
most
and a-
people meet up down at the local pub.
And you're attracted to the bad boys and you think you can
Maybe,
change them.
yeah.
But unfortunately, they can't be changed.
This is
It's
true.
tale as old as time.
Or I'll put my tinfoil hat on. Is there somehow the bikie gang linked to politics?
Oh, maybe it. Look,
There's a link to high society.
jumping straight into the conspiracy zone here.
Yep.
But I think that it was all a conspiracy by the bikie gang to try to get information.
Or was it a conspiracy by the Greens
A conspiracy.
trying
Wait,
to get information on the bikies?
maybe. Maybe Lydia's just
Maybe
has
this
to
is
take the
reading
fall
damage
here.
control.
Maybe she's just
Damage-
taking
Look,
the
they got to
fall
get
for
their
the greater
weed from
good.
somewhere.
The greater good.
See, I thought about making that joke, and then I thought very much about making a Tao joke, and then I resisted the urge to make that joke.
Yeah, I just took that in the other direction. For those of you who appreciate your hot fuzz, you're welcome.
Great movie. Okay. Well, anyone have anything else they want to add on this Lidia Thorpe thing other than what we have so far, which is basically it's not great PR. Probably nothing actually happened. It's all being blown way out of proportion.
Is it bad of me to say that I miss Richard Di Natale?
No, I missed him as well. I didn't miss the whole Steve Jobs vibe he gave off, though. I found it pretentious.
I honestly think the reason why the Greens have been so successful these days is because coasting's the wrong word. They have a firm foundation in the respectability that Richard Di Natale built. Bob Brown was an activist, and that was necessary for the time. But when he handed over the reins to Di Natale took the party in a really respectable direction.
Well, where do you think Banter's taking it at the moment then?
I think Banter's taking it a little bit more activist.
Possibly.
And I think like it's the problem with being a political party. You need to stand for what you believe in, but if you want more power, you have to start moving towards the center.
Yes. That's perfectly reasonable.
What? Just to appeal to those dirty centrists.
But most people don't care about politics. You need to have something that unites people. Like
Yeah.
the whole idea of that maybe we should look after the environment.
The majority of people are in the centre, so you can't be too extreme in any direction.
This is true.
They're appealing to the majority.
I think a lot of the problem, though, is that most people are in the center is an oversimplification of the situation, because most people are in the center of the political spectrum for the particular country they're in, to try to avoid drumming up too many emotions. Take the US, for example, where to get accused of being a communist, all you have to do is deny a boss the right to execute his employees on the floor in front of everyone, and you're a communist. So, which is, rather extreme.
Well, understandably.
By most
Yeah, I mean,
countries'
the employees
standards.
are his property. He can do with them what he likes.
Exactly. It's not slavery. It's indentured servitude.
He pays it fair and square.
Although, look, I think with all of the natural disasters that have been occurring lately, the fact that we've just had, we're on month 18 now of non-stop rain. I think climate change is a large issue in a lot of people's minds. And I think a lot of people are starting to see through the bullshit of the major parties with regards to it, because as much as you like Labor and they're better than the LNP, don't get me wrong, they're still kind of shit. At least when it comes to that issue.
I'd be a lot more willing to take the Greens at their word on that if they were at least willing to consider that the moratorium on nuclear power should be lifted. And I know we've had this discussion about the economics of nuclear power and all of that sort of stuff, but there are enough young people who don't have an ideological opposition to nuclear power. And if it fails in the free market, then it fails in the free market, but at least we should be open to everything because it is emissions, very low emissions.
Oh, look, when we did our discussion on nuclear power, I think I made it pretty clear that I'm totally okay with the moratorium being lifted. My objection to nuclear power is I just don't realistically see it happening. And I see it as a bit of a red herring. Part of the reason I want the moratorium lifted is because I just want to stop talking about it and get on with things. I see it as a bit of a red herring, and there's the discussion about it is just a roadblock to actually fixing the problems.
Speaking of which, Peter Dutton's been going on about it pretty consistently these days. You know what it would have been good if he'd gone on about? Nuclear power while people were in power to do something about it.
It's almost as though he's only talking about it because he knows that it won't go anywhere, and it's a way to rile up the far right that are obsessed with mining.
And it gets him attention while he's not in power.
Exactly.
They do it while they're in power, then they've got to actually do something about it. If they talk, that's the sales pitch to get in next time.
Look, to Mr. Potato Head's credit, at least he's offering an alternative vision for Australia rather than being an opposition leader who simply says, I don't like what the current government stands for, like Abbott did.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Abbott's whole, we're not Labor. And who was it that responded with, we're not Labor? For fuck's sake. Anyway, so that's enough news. I think we've had enough news for a week. So let's get into the marketplace of ideas. Ben Shapiro's favorite topic. Segment, sorry, not topic, segment.
I can put out a Ben Shapiro voice for you if you like.
Please
okay,
do that.
folks.
Please do that for the rest of this segment.
Can you talk 2 times faster?
I'm definitely trying.
Can you please also just gish gallop your way through this entire segment?
Well, okay, folks, but what you got to consider is if you hate landlords, then you literally think that landlords should die, and that makes you a murderer.
See, for a moment I thought we actually had Ben Shapiro on the show.
Can you tell I used to watch a little bit of it?
I can tell a little bit. I feel like when you say used to, that implies you don't anymore. Or
make whatever implications you wish to.
Or it's you don't watch a little bit of it and you watch a lot.
Yeah.
Anyway, our topic of discussion for the marketplace of ideas tonight is landlords and their contribution to society. So I will start by let's go around and start by stating what our starting position on this is. My starting position is landlords do not produce any meaningful contribution to society.
My contribution is landlords. I think you mean land chads.
David, your position.
My position would be, I think they do contribute something to society. I think there's a bit of nuance as to the type of landlord I'm okay with.
See, this is why I said anything meaningful. I'm going to use my words to weasel out of everything. I learned it from watching you, Stephen. Tom.
I don't think they contribute anything that the government shouldn't contribute, and when not policed properly, they only contribute negative things. As in, you know, when they get a bit too far with the property developing or manipulating the market, stuff like that. That's much more harmful than any good they've done.
So it's not so much you think that they don't do anything good, it's things that they do net negative. Would that be a fair summary?
And what they do that's positive shouldn't really be something that's expected of them. It's something that the government should be doing anyway, which isn't much.
Fair enough. Does anyone want to go first with any argument for their position? I suppose I will go first since the silence is deafening. So look, when it comes to landlords, I would like to start by separating out a couple of things. So for starters, when I say landlords, I'm talking about landlords as an institution rather than landlords as individual people. I'm sure there are some landlords out there that as people are perfectly fine people. I just think that what they're doing is bad. And my reason for this is that fundamentally, landlording comes down to you are hoarding excess resources and then charging people a premium to access them. And on top of that, by hoarding them, you're creating an artificial shortage that results in prices going higher and making it harder for people to access it. And if it was with anything that was not essential, that'd be totally okay. If you were doing it with Warhammer miniatures, I'm sure nerds on the internet would be upset with you, but at least you're not denying people shelter just because they don't have enough money to pay the overinflated prices that you have created by restricting supply.
I'll go next because I guess I went second the last time. I think that there are certainly some massive issues that we're going through at the moment in regards to housing availability. I was just in a study meeting with some people, and one of our group members is actually living at a friend's place because the lease ran out. She can't find a place to live. So it's a very real issue. And as much as we talk about this theoretically, we need to be sympathetic to the fact that there are people who are genuinely going through a lot of suffering, not just in high cost of living, but even not being able to find a place to live. And that is a problem. That being said, we talk about the idea of hoarding real estate. I think that implies that there's a finite supply, and I agree with that because the supply has been constricted for years and years now. We've treated property as an investment, as a vehicle to creating wealth exclusively. But I still think there is a place for landlords, and I think landlords do fulfill a need in the market.
David?
I think I ultimately agree with Mitch in a sense that my thought is that landlords do provide a service, and while you say hoarding of assets, I would probably be interested to see the figures, as I don't think there will be that many people who own many more than one investment property. I think the majority of people do buy a property as an investment for retirement or savings or whatever reason. I don't think many more would end up with more than two. I do think there's a problem with people who do hoard them, and I do not like the idea of someone who owns, say, 6, 7, 10. People do that, or property developers, people who purposely just consume and buy and sell, or buy and sell and buy and hold just to have multiple properties. I think and it comes back down to my pet peeve of loopholes in the system. I think loopholes need to be damn stopped because they always get exploited to the utmost extent. But at the same time, I think landlords do provide a gateway to getting to someone who might be in a position unable to afford a property, in that it is cheaper than buying a property to rent a property nearly all the time. But I do agree. I know we've chatted about this in chat that over the long term, yes, buying a property is better, but sometimes people might need to or want to rent. And I think that's where it does provide an advantage for those people who need that.
Fair enough. Tom.
I actually agree a lot with what David just said, except the contribution that they're adding isn't really a net gain, I don't think, because a lot of people that are renting could be for around the same living price of that owning a house. It's just a matter of how much time they have to save the money and pay it off and all that, and whether or not they want to stay in one location for a long time. So it's like more of a lifestyle choice, but it doesn't really contribute anything. It's just two different people having two different choices about what they want to do. And I guess for the people that do want to own a house but can't afford it straight away and still need a place to live, that's where there should be more help from the government to offer rentals to them, just for the meantime, so it's more legislated and better maintained and easier to deal with while they're getting ready to own their own house.
Fair enough.
I guess this is where I was going to say it at the end, that I knew where Tom would disagree, is he would say the government needs to provide that. I see it as, why not allow another person to benefit from it as well? And hey, I'd be open to potential incentives. I don't know how it will work, political, like laws or anything, that made it easier for people, like you said, Tom, who need somewhere to live, but also allow the house to be owned by another individual as a retirement plan.
Well,
benefits
actually,
to people.
That's pretty much what I'm saying is that, yeah, they should have the right to do that. If someone wants to benefit from it and become a landlord, that's perfectly fine. But if there's a shortage, the government should be the one that's picking up the slack there. And it's not really something that I think landlords need to contribute or are necessarily contributing, because it's just the free market that's sort of leading to that happening naturally. But if there's a shortage, then that's where it's the government that's got to do it.
I don't actually think it's the free market that's leading to that shortage, though. We've had
free markets leading to people owning houses.
Mitch,
becoming landlords.
Mitch, can you just hold that thought, please? Because
Yep.
We'll get to that in a moment.
Yep.
We'll get to talking to solutions to issues about it at the moment, as I think that's going to be tied up in the solution there.
I also have a tinfoil hat that I want to put on at some point.
Oh, this will be fun. There's just one thing I did want to address first, where I think me and David may be talking past each other on this. Because David, you said that you didn't think it was hoarding, and you were okay with them having one or two, but if it gets to 6, 7, 8, that's what you would consider hoarding. See, this is where I think we may have a bit of a miscommunication here, because I'm defining hoarding as holding more than you need. So you need one house to live in. There are a few exceptions where you may need more than one. That's debatable. But soon as you start having more than one, as far as I'm concerned, that's what I'm defining as hoarding.
Okay, well that's why we
Oh, well, you
probably
might need
disagree. I
The
think it's
second
fine
one
for
to help
people.
pay for the first one.
I see it. It's an investment decision. It's just like buying shares to me. Like you
Well-
you buy a house, and I don't think houses shouldn't have such an like the ridiculous growth they've had. I see it as it's an investment to put towards something. You're providing a home for someone who might need to, rent
See,
it.
here's the thing, though.
You're effectively just locking away that money for your retirement,
You're
whether the
not
house goes
providing a
up in
home, though.
valuable or not.
If you buy a house that already exists, you have
Does the
taken that
person have a
off the
place to live?
market, and no one who goes, no, you've bought a house that already exists. You have taken that out of the market, and no one is then able to buy that until you decide to sell it. You are then effectively saying that if someone wants to use this house, they have to pay you the amount of money that you want, and they can pay that to you forever, and they never get the house. You get all of the profit for that while you've taken it out of circulation. And if you don't find anyone that's willing to rent it out from you at that price, then the
You're
house
stuck
sits
with the
empty.
mortgage.
Okay, you're stuck with the mortgage, but if you have a job that's able to pay that, and you're able to pay it off without renting it out to someone, then you're able to continuously demand that. And when you have enough people doing that, that creates an artificial scarcity.
But by the same token, if you have enough money, if you're earning a decent enough wage that you can afford to pay off a mortgage on a house that you don't have anyone in, that is a significant disadvantage to you. If I was paying $400 on a mortgage every week, then that's $400, and that is, I'm not getting any returns for it at all. That is money that I can't put into the
gamble.
stock market
My
or
point
to
wasn't
Bitcoin or something.
My point wasn't so much that it would, be a good or bad financial decision. My point was that the same number of houses that existed before you made that decision still exist. Best case scenario, you have not produced anything. Worst case scenario, you have reduced the supply of houses.
But I'd actually suggest that
But you're putting it back up for supply for rent. The house is still available for someone to live in, and you're putting it up for supply at usually at a lower cost to someone than the cost of your mortgage.
Yes,
you're generally not going to be able to rent your house out more than what your mortgage is.
How many years does it take before the amount that you can ask for it goes up to the point that it goes past the mortgage that you're paying on it?
It'd be years. It'd be years.
It's not years.
Well, mine is.
Because I don't know if you've noticed, but rents have gone through the roof
Have
astronomically.
you seen how much interest you get charged from a bank when you buy a house?
Yeah, and if you bought it 10 years ago.
Yeah, 10 years. So you got to wait 10 years to make your money back. In that 10 years, you're going to pay 20 grand interest.
Okay,
My dad-
if I could make my money back on an investment, if I could make my money back on an investment 10 years, that would be a
There's no guarantee.
There's no guarantee on any investment, but the fact that is what's happened historically indicates that something has gone catastrophically wrong.
Yeah,
well, I think it's worth like to David's example as well. I've got my dad has an investment property. He's had it for 20 years. He bought it after our parents divorced, and he has. And this feeds into the point where obviously you said some landlords are good, some the institution you don't like, but some landlords are fine. My dad has had a long-term tenant in the property, and his philosophy is if you're a good landlord and you have a good tenant, then you make it as easy for that tenant to stay as possible. So he's kept rent $50, $60 below market value. He's put in for repairs, all of that sort of stuff. He's looked after this house. He has not made a profit on that house from year to year since he bought it. and he will probably make a profit when he sells it, whenever that is. But
yeah, there's no guarantee you're going to make a profit when you sell the house. And I like I said before, I don't think the exponential growth we're seeing at the moment is good. And I don't think houses should be seen as, oh, you buy now, you sell in 30 years and you double your money. I disagree with that. I would say you would hope they stay level and maybe go up a little bit, because of inflation and things. But that's how I see it. It's not meant to be a pour your money in and double it later. I see it as how it should be is you're putting, let's say I'm using big numbers because it's easier. You buy $1 million house. 5% on that per year is huge. What's that? My brain's not working.
50,000.
Yeah, $50,000 a year just in interest that you're going to be paying just to have that mortgage. Now, I don't think in 30 years you should be able to sell that for $2 million. You shouldn't expect that from an investment. But I would expect maybe in 30 years you sell it for 1.2 million. And the purpose isn't to double your money. The purpose is to put that money away. You're kind of contributing to your retirement. It's like your super. You're paying a bit of money. Yeah, like a bank account. Yeah, exactly, Tom. It's just you're putting it in an asset rather than in a bank account.
On that point, though, that actually leads to a bit of a catch-22 because
I'll be back in a moment, guys. I just need to duck out of the room for a sec.
Yeah, for sure. That leads to a bit of a catch-22 though, because if you can expect to double, triple the value of a house in 30 years, which is what it seems to have been over the past little while, then that's the incentive to take a negative gearing position, to pay a little bit, to make a loss on it year on year. And in a sense, depending on where you live, that might actually make make renting tenable, and so that you can actually what was I going to say? Save up for a house deposit because renting is cheaper. Because if you're in a situation where you're not going to get capital growth on the house, then the rent is going to go up so that you can actually pay down your loan quicker, have equity in the house so that you can then buy another one. And that's the issue that we're having here out at Kingaroy. There's very little housing out here. There's places for houses to be built, but not terribly many. And what's going on at the moment is that we have a housing crisis out here. Houses are going for about $400, $450 a week. But the actual cost of a house to build, you could get one built for about $250,000, $300,000 fairly easily. Land is cheap out here, and the house is, houses are cheap to put up, and that assumes that you don't buy a Queenslander from somewhere else and have it shipped, because that's something you can do up here apparently. But this is the problem. Because there's no capital growth in Kingaroy, you cannot expect capital growth in a country town necessarily, unless you get a whole lot of city people coming out and deciding they can work from home. Then you are going to have higher rents because they're not going to expect capital growth. Capital growth actually keeps the rent down.
You could also keep the rent down by making sure that you supply enough houses to everyone that needs one in the area.
Wouldn't that be great?
Yes, it would.
Well, that's
something the government should be doing instead of constantly giving handouts to people to go and buy a house, which just result in the price of houses going up and making them more unaffordable.
They need to just maybe control people from investing in too many properties and leaving them empty, because that's really what's causing a lot of issues. Is the property investors are actually leaving their properties empty to manipulate the market or force development.
In Queensland, that is not the case. I mean, it might be the case in Sydney, definitely, but in Queensland, they have a vacancy rate of 0.7.
Well, we need to build more houses up there.
Yeah, we do. And this is what I was gonna. If it's okay that that we're at this point to say it now. Like we're talking about public housing. Public housing is better than no housing. But the solution, as I see it, is that the government local government needs to release more land.
Or more land would be good.
or review zoning and allow for higher zoning. Unfortunately, Australians hate that.
I agree. I'm just thinking when you say that, what would the potential repercussions of oversupply be?
You'd see a drop in prices,
Which would be great.
which would be good, which
actually-
is what needs to happen.
Mm.
A lot of
Unfortunately,
the developers
Could,
and investors in the country would leave, but they're not really doing any good anyway. So
but that's what I mean. Like, could it? You would see a drop in prices. I'm just thinking, could it cause obviously you want and I know Tom, you and Jono were talking about this. You want a crash, or you want a recession essentially, but you don't want it
not
to
a crash.
crash and fall and
I'm
plummet.
look,
You
plummet.
want it to plateau.
We know Jono's all for that, but
no. Look, I
I'm
should
for it
probably
too.
specify that. Crashing any economic market, especially one that's as important as housing to people's relatively
would not be
well-being,
good.
I don't think that's a good thing, because a market as big as housing, especially in Australia, is tied to that many other things. It will have echo
Flow-on
effects,
yeah.
flow-on effects throughout the economy, which would be bad. Crashing, no. I also don't think that just having it plateau for 30 years is enough to solve the problem. My ideal balance would be to half property prices over the next 10 years, in hard numbers, not adjusted for inflation. Because
That would probably be considered a crash, a pretty hard
Yeah.
one. But I think if we just need to control the growth of it, like it's already gone way too far with what they're worth now. But trying to get it to come back would be too destructive. Just controlling the growth of it or slowing it down to a point that it's matching inflation at best would be the primary goal. And there's only a few ways you can do that. But if you don't do that, then you will end up with the crash where maybe not in the next 10 years, but in 15, 20 years, it could end up where they've halved in value because we didn't try to slow down the growth, which there's certain politicians have been trying to get done since 2008, and it still hasn't happened because they get talked about in a very misleading way.
Well, here's the thing with that. I don't know if I actually don't remember if I ever threw it in the chat, but are you guys familiar with a video by CPG Grey titled "The Rules for Rulers"?
Yes.
Yeah, Mitch
No.
is
And
familiar.
you did throw
with
that in the chat, by the
I
way.
did. I thought I did. Basically, the concept is that no man rules alone, and everyone that holds power has keys to power that they're answer to. Using the example of dictatorships as like the dictator is subservient to the generals, and if he doesn't do what the generals want, then they'll let the peasants storm the palace and replace him. If he doesn't give them enough treasure. So basically, the leader's job is to raise the treasure and distribute it to their key supporters. This concept then translates over into a democracy in the form of voter blocks. So, for example, in the US, they have massive subsidies for corn farmers because the votes of corn farmers is absolutely essential to getting elected. Same thing in Australia. We have such insanely high subsidies for investment properties and property developers because the votes of those groups are essential to gaining power. And it's the reason why you can't run in this country. You cannot run on a platform of I'm going to do anything that does not endlessly increase property prices and expect to get elected. It's the reason why it's a large reason why Labor lost the last election. Dave, I believe that was one of your key reasons for not voting for them, if I remember correctly.
That was a while ago, yeah.
In 2019, because what was his name? Bill Shorten at the time was saying basically we're going to undo negative gearing, and the property developers ran a smear campaign, and he was absolutely destroyed because of that topic. It's part of the reason why this time their solution to housing affordability is we're going to effectively give people 40% of the upfront cost and say you can buy a house with just a 2% deposit. It's like, that's not actually going to solve that problem. That's just going to accelerate the growth of house prices
See,
while giving the guise of looking like you're doing
that's
something about housing
exactly
affordability.
I actually wrote an article on this, and
that's exactly what I was talking about, though. Like that, Bill Shorten it wasn't ever really saying we're going to get rid of negative gearing. What he was going to do wouldn't affect anyone unless they bought more than 5 properties after he made the changes. So everyone would have still had the negative gearing. It would have been fine. He was just listening to what the experts were saying about how to get the market to slow down with its growth, like I was saying before. And then the media went around saying, oh, he's going to get rid of all your negative gearing, so everyone that owns a house will be affected. And everyone believed them. And they lost votes like David because he just bought a house. It makes sense.
That wasn't the only reason.
He absolutely was not going to get rid of negative gearing.
I definitely remember it was one of the big 3, David, though, when we were discussing it back then.
It was one of them, and I remember I actually went on Labor's website and read their policy, and I don't remember the 5 house thing, but I do remember because I actually went on both parties' site, but that was one of them. There were other ones as well that I didn't like the 50-50 gender thing, and I think was another one, and I can't remember the other one.
I would worry about these social politics. They kill themselves.
Yeah,
that one was still there. I'm pretty sure this time around.
Oh, look, when it comes to that sort of thing,
and
as far as I'm
had no effect.
Those sorts of policies have so little effect on your average person's life. The fact that people actually stress about them at all, that baffles me.
I mean, obviously, I love landlords. I love the idea of landlords. I think you should all be giving a 15% tip to your landlords with every rent check.
The
But
sarcasm is strong with this one.
But I would actually suggest that there is, as we've said, Jono, you made a distinction between landlords, the people, and landlords, the institution of property ownership. I'd actually make a further distinction. I'd say mum and dad landlords versus corporation landlords like BlackRock, Vanguard in the United States. I'm going to put on my tinfoil hat. Is that all right?
Tinfoil away.
Alrighty. So here's my perspective. So I've read a number of articles about 3 or so years ago, and I may have talked about this on the channel before, but one thing I've noticed is that there has actually been a movement against private landlordship. They actually, like, if you look at the rates of who owns property in Australia, Australia is so far ahead of Europe, it's not funny. A lot of our property is held by family investors, whereas most of the property in Europe is held by corporations. And it was actually suggested in the article that I was reading, it's so bad that Australian families are exposed to volatility in the housing market. Wouldn't it be so much better for the Australian people if corporations had that exposure instead?
Yeah, no thanks.
Yeah, read between the lines on that. They don't want us to own our own houses. Yeah, tinfoil hat off.
Well, I mean, look, that does sound like corporations for you. They're profit-seeking entities that exist purely to make money. Of course, they want to own everything.
And my perception is the higher the housing prices are, the easier it is for these corporations to do it, because as a corporation, you can justify a 30, 40, 50-year return because you just have to wait that long, and then the market is yours. But it's just a matter of outlasting.
Yeah, provided you can produce enough cash flow in the meantime.
Indeed, so
I guess one thing when we're talking about the supplies so low, is the main reason, Mitchell, what you said, is it really just zoning and the access of land? Because I'm just like,
it's a couple of reasons.
If house prices are so damn high, why the hell aren't we building them like crazy?
I think it's also. I think another thing we haven't discussed is the fact that in a lot of places the market has only just caught up to the fact that both people work. Like both partners in a relationship work these days. I think in Queensland in 2020, it was very achievable to get a house in Redland Bay for about $400,000.
I think
That's a waiting
also
period.
I
Can't do
think
that.
also we are seeing the impacts of after COVID. Obviously, people saved a lot of money. I know me and my partner during that time, because she wasn't working, you couldn't go anywhere, you couldn't spend any money. So we saved a lot of money. And then also the fact people now work from home they save a lot more money. So I think that just adds to
Well, that
exacerbate the
adds,
problem of people have more money now, so they're
Yeah, which is
able
good.
to
Goes back to my point about how every solution that actually ends up getting implemented to solve the housing affordability issue in this country ultimately just makes houses more unaffordable, because
yeah
the solution is just give people more money, and in this case, that's just not going to work to solve the problem. You have to. The only solution to this problem is to make houses cheaper. There's no other way around it.
Or at least make cheap options. You know, on the outskirts of cities, make some actual cheap housings. But then you end up with problems with cheap housing areas. You know?
Well, the thing, you do that, and you're going to reduce demand on rentals for starters, which will put downward pressure on rental prices, which, with rent prices having downward pressure on them, will then cause some investors to start leaving, which will put downward pressure on prices, which will cause more investors to start leaving. Once you start pulling the downward pressure on prices lever, you've got to be very careful with it if you don't want to have prices start dropping.
That's what Tom was just saying about releasing land outside cities. That's where I think COVID has changed that. Cities aren't that necessary anymore. That's why people are moving to the outskirts, because they don't need to live in the city anymore to work. They can work from home.
Well, why not just go one step further and invest in infrastructure in regional centres like Kingaroy? The only thing that would make this place more perfect to live in would be if it had better internet.
Sorry about that, Mitch.
Oh, you will be. But yeah, I mean, I love living out country. It's honestly a great lifestyle for someone like myself who doesn't feel the need to go out.
It's only because you like guns, isn't it?
That too, but also there's no traffic.
That'd be sweet.
Yeah, I like I like living in more built-up areas, even with working from home. But that's because I am happy to go to like multiple shopping centres to get the things I want, rather than just have one that's within driving distance.
Yeah, I'm with Tom on that one. Look, I think Newcastle is the best place in Australia to live for the following reasons. Reason number one, it's not Sydney. Little known fact, but Sydney is actually radioactive. The whole place, it's all radioactive. Don't go there. It's terrible.
Give him a tinfoil hat, Mitch.
Actually,
that explains a lot. Actually,
technically speaking, everywhere is slightly radioactive. But look, I'm not going to be giving everyone a free physics lesson today.
Save that for the other podcast.
Yeah, look, physics down under. That's starting next week.
Are you going to charge rent for that, Jono?
Sure.
Subscription service?
I will engage in rent-seeking behavior. Oh, isn't that so funny? How when you phrase it as rent-seeking behavior, it starts sounding really dirty. But as soon as you say renting a house to someone, it's like you're some kingpin financial guru.
Well, let's